You know those moments when life hands you a neighbor so entitled, she turns your quiet backyard sanctuary into a personal war zone. The kind of slow-burning injustice that makes your blood simmer because all you wanted was the simple peace you worked so hard for. The kind of home you dreamed of one day, filling with laughter from a family you haven't even started yet. And yet here comes someone who moves in after your fence has stood for a decade and suddenly decides your property is her personal eyesore. Well, folks, that was me, Ethan, sitting there in the humid Texas evening air of Willow Bend in Plano, Texas, cracking open another lukewarm beer from the budget case, my eyes tracing the flawless 50-foot expanse of inch-and-a-half thick ballistic glass where my old 3-foot wooden fence used to stand. And the craziest, most satisfying twist of all is that Vanessa didn't just inspire it. She basically financed the whole ridiculous masterpiece through her nonstop campaign of passive-aggressive sabotage that left me with no choice but to fight back in the most expensive, most visible, most gloriously transparent way imaginable. Let me take you back 6 weeks. Paint the picture so you feel the heat and the frustration like I did. Picture a classic suburban slice of Plano, Texas, hot, sticky, everything painted in that desperate beige palette of cookie-cutter perfection. My place on 456 Oak Grove Lane was nothing fancy. Built back in the optimistic 80s with a backyard that was just grass worn thin from years of honest living. A rusty old grill that had seen better days. And that low wooden fence, legal, maintenance, free, utterly forgettable, the kind of boundary that simply existed without asking for attention. Then there was Vanessa, living large in the oversized McMansion directly behind me. The one she bragged about paying top dollar for because of its supposed $1 million view. Except when you actually looked from her second-story sunroom, what you got was the flickering Whataburger sign down the road missing its W half the time. That hulking electrical substation humming away behind chain link and warning signs. And yes, my perfectly ordinary backyard framed like an unwelcome guest in her curated panorama. The fence had been there long before she ever signed her closing papers. Yet the moment she settled in it became her personal vendetta, and her opening move arrived in a crisp, scented envelope slipped under my door one quiet morning, addressed to the homeowner at 456 Oak Grove Lane in that flowery script that screamed superiority. Words dripping with concern about how my vertical obstruction was destroying her natural light flow and shattering the uninterrupted visual harmony from her sunroom. Signed by a concerned neighbor and proud member of the Willow Bend Homeowners Association. I taped it to the fridge and laughed at first. Vertical obstruction. Really, it was just wood standing straight. Nothing more, but ignoring it turned out to be my first big mistake because Vanessa didn't stop there. Oh no, she escalated with the kind of calculated pettiness that makes you question how people like her sleep at night. She planted invasive bamboo right on her side, the aggressive kind that spreads like wildfire, clearly hoping it would swallow my fence whole and turn my yard into her green nightmare. So I calmly trimmed it back to the property line every time it crossed, bagging the clippings and leaving them in a neat little compost bucket on her side with a polite note. And let me tell you the fury that radiated from her windows after that was almost visible. Weeks of this quiet war dragged on until the final confrontation exploded right on the property line 3 weeks ago. I was out there trying to grill one lonely hot dog on that sputtering old grill, minding my own business, when she stormed over in those yoga pants that probably cost more than my entire patio set, her voice sharp as she spat my name like it was an insult, declaring this had gone far enough. Her lawyer was already drafting papers, and when I asked what crime I had committed, she launched into it. The fence blocked her precious vista. It was killing her resale value. I needed to tear it down immediately or replace it with something transparent, something that respected the line of sight. Something like glass if I had any decency to invest in the neighborhood. She stood there so smug, so certain she had delivered the knockout blow. And in that split second beside the smoking grill with my hot dog still defrosting on the side, something inside me snapped. Not in anger exactly, but in this crystal clear, floodlight bright moment of pure inspiration. I looked at her perfectly furious face, the woman who had spent 6 weeks chipping away at my peace. At the sanctuary I had built for the life I hoped to share one day, and I smiled slow and wide, the kind of smile that probably looked unhinged to anyone watching. And I told her, you know what, Vanessa? That's actually a brilliant idea. Consider your view officially upgraded." She walked away victorious, convinced she had won, never realizing I wasn't about to slap up some flimsy decorative panels. No, sir. I was going all the way. 50 feet of triple laminated Class 5 ballistic glass. The real stuff they use in banks and armored vehicles. The kind that laughs at assault rifles. Installed not for safety, but for the sweetest, most costly form of justice money could buy. I was broke before I even started, but the fire in my chest made it feel worth every future penny. So I dove in headfirst, Googling bulletproof glass suppliers and realizing this wasn't Home Depot territory. This was serious custom fabrication for high-threat environments. My bank account practically screamed at me from the screen. First, I called Travis over at Reliable Fence and Deck, this good old boy type who showed up in a beat-up truck, chewed tobacco, no shoes. And when I casually asked about 50 feet of Class 5 ballistic panels 6 feet tall, he actually stopped mid-chew and stared like I'd lost my mind. He laughed, offered cedar or vinyl or chain link instead, warned me about the weight, the footings I'd need, the way it would devour my retirement. But when I explained Vanessa's demand for architectural transparency, he just shook his head and said, "Son, this isn't a fence, it's a bank vault you can see through. Get a new neighbor or maybe a taller hat." Next came the high-end security route with Damien from Elite Perimeter Solutions, suited up like he was heading to a Black Ops briefing, pacing my property line, pointing lasers at Vanessa's sunroom, talking fiber optic detection systems, pressure plates, even a pulsed energy barrier, and an armored gazebo disguised as a watchtower. The quote alone was mortgage level, and I realized asking security pros for spite fencing was like hiring Navy SEALs to hang wallpaper, pure overkill. I was almost ready to quit when I found Mitch at Custom Ballistic Glass. His site looked straight out of the 90s with a pixelated photo of him next to a hot rod. But he showed up, measured without a single judgmental question, mumbled about 6 panels, 12 by 6, inch and a half thick to stop the fun stuff. And when I leaned in and whispered my only threat profile was my neighbor's smug satisfaction, he grinned that knowing grin and said, "Ah, the spite's special. I can get you leftover panels from a canceled job. Deal sealed on a payment plan that drained my emergency fund. Forced a loan I swore I'd never touch, and promised 6 months of ramen. But the revenge, that was priceless." The install was pure organized chaos that turned the whole street into a spectacle. Day 1, Mitch's crew of tattooed silent types poured rebar-reinforced concrete footings deep enough for a monument, while Vanessa watched from her sunroom still smiling, convinced I was giving her tasteful decorative glass. Day 2, the crane rumbled in, street closed, panels arriving wrapped like giant gifts on a flatbed, so heavy they swayed like dangerous translucent sails in the breeze. Neighbors gathering, with phones out. One guy, Mr. Whitaker across the way, actually brought popcorn, and slowly, painfully, the structure rose, 6 massive sheets bolted into steel posts hidden behind decorative covers. The result so perfectly clear that from a distance the boundary simply vanished, yet nothing was truly blocked. My rusty grill, the grass, the entire mundane beauty of my yard now on full crystal display for her $1,000,000 view. I was wiping sweat when Vanessa finally descended, stopping dead on her lawn, her smirk collapsing as she realized this wasn't delicate lobby glass, but industrial-grade armor. Thick enough to shrug off geology, she ran her hand along it, whispering, "What is this?" And I walked up, pressed my palm to the cool surface, and announced loud enough for the whole block to hear, "This, Vanessa, is exactly what you demanded. A transparent boundary," tapping it with a solid thunk that echoed like finality. "Triple laminated security glass for neighborhood safety. Wouldn't want any rogue baseball or stray high-caliber round ruining your visual harmony." Her eyes finally registering the depth of my response. The glass too tall, too clear, too absolute. A monument to her own words. And as she sputtered, "You're mad," I leaned in close to the unbreakable wall and mouthed, "I'm not mad. I'm broke, and I'm about to get paid." The glass stood there majestic and absurd, a crystal wall of truth separating our worlds. But my bank account was now a ghost town, credit cards screaming, the Willow Bend Homeowners Association violation letter already in the mail courtesy of Vanessa sitting on the board, and ramen was about to become my only food group. So I paced along that pristine 50-foot display case, thinking if this monstrosity was going to bankrupt me, it damn well needed to pay its own way. And that's when the idea hit. Like lightning, it wasn't just a fence anymore. It was the largest, most pointless premium showcase in the entire state. And what do you do with a showcase like that? You charge admission to the greatest show in suburbia, the visible agony of entitled defeat playing out live. I grabbed a cheap whiteboard and markers, channeling every carnival barker I had ever seen, and crafted the signage that would become legend, taping it to a thin wooden stake right beside the glass. It read Ethan's Architectural Transparency Exhibit, a celebration of uninterrupted visual harmony as demanded by local stakeholders. With tiered donations, basic 1-minute glimpse for $2 selfie allowed no flash. The 5-minute structural integrity package with complimentary tap to feel the thunk for 5. The $10 premium view of vengeance guaranteed neighbor reaction timing dependent on drama plus instant ramen packet. And the $50 VIP Karen special, Vanessa special, private viewing during peak confrontation hours with 24-hour notice to stage the lighting. Venmo QR code right there. No cash because I refuse to touch anything she might have handled. Disclaimer: the bulletproofing covers the glass, not my sanity. The first customer was a 12-year-old on a scooter who scanned the code, sent $2 with a LOL, took his selfie, and zoomed off. Then the trickle became a stream. Locals on evening walks drawn by the audacity, not paying for the view but for the story. So I started wearing a bright red polo as official curator, guiding small groups with dramatic flair. Here, folks, is the failing infrastructure of the American dream pointing at my rusty grill with its desperate char marks. Truly profound. And people loved it. The Sunbather special, where I just sat reading a paperback, became a surprise hit. Extra dollar to try and smudge the glass, which they never could. And the pacing neighbor package only available during her HOA hours when you could watch her fume inside. Within a week, I was pulling $75 a day, enough to upgrade to microwave ramen cups. Progress that felt like sweet victory. But Vanessa watched the foot traffic and Venmo pings like it was her personal nightmare. She tried loud opera blasting toward the glass. I answered with aggressive 80s synth pop, creating a sonic "we're only feet from her porch" that customers actually paid extra to experience. She attempted midnight vandalism with a bucket of dark paint, but my motion lights caught her mid-sneak. She froze, dropped the bucket, splattering only her own lawn into a crime scene mess. Retreating in fuzzy slippers, defeated. Then came the industrial sprinklers aimed at the glass, hoping to blur everything. I waited for the crowd, walked out in board shorts, set up a beach chair under an umbrella, and announced welcome to the tropical rainforest vengeance package. Enjoy the mist for $2 more. She shut them off, instantly realizing she was only feeding the show. Then the authorities arrived. 2 cruisers pulling up mid-tour while I described the tragic beauty of my wilting plants to a tourist from out of town. Officer Harlan weary and large, Officer Vargas young and fighting a smile. They had complaints of unlicensed business, peep show, public nuisance via excessive transparency. I kept my most innocent face and explained it was no business, just voluntary donations for a spontaneous sociological performance art piece celebrating neighborly resolution. Through extreme investment, showed them the fabricated exhibit charter, reminded them the fence met every zoning rule for a 6-foot decorative barrier. And when Vanessa stormed out pointing and screaming, "He is mocking me, charging people to watch me," the officers exchanged glances. Officer Harlan finally saying, "Ma'am, he's not breaking noise ordinances or blocking traffic, and there's no law against excessive transparency or asking for money to appreciate your own property." They couldn't cite me. Officer Vargas even scanned the QR himself for the $5 structural appreciation package as they left, and Vanessa's defeated wail as the cruisers pulled away was music sweeter than any opera. That police visit became rocket fuel. The story spread like wildfire, starting with the Suburban Spat Chronicles blog post titled "Fence War Ends in Six-Figure Bulletproof Triumph." Then Channel 11 News showed up with reporter Brooke and a crew filming right on the curb, capturing Vanessa's wilting flowers in frame. She stuck the mic in my face, asking motivation, and I leaned in with that cheerful, unhinged energy, saying it's simple architectural compliance mixed with a celebration of standing your ground. I call it the view of vengeance. Come appreciate suburban spite. The segment aired, and suddenly people drove in from 3 counties. Venmo exploding so hard my phone rebooted twice. Lines forming on the sidewalk. I was a full-blown glass fence entrepreneur, and Vanessa was losing control of her perfect world with her house, now permanent backdrop to the joke. Her retaliation attempts only made the exhibit stronger. The sonic assault with classical music I countered with synth pop, turning it into paid entertainment. The paint fiasco that ruined her own grass under floodlights. The sprinklers that became my tropical package. Each failure feeding the crowds and the cash flow until I could finally breathe again. Then I decided to make it 24 hours spectacular, calling an electrician named Mark who just shrugged at the request to wire dimmable, color-changing LED strips along the base and top, turning the entire wall into a pulsing beacon of blue and crimson visible from the freeway. He installed it all, muttering this wall could stop a tank, but you want party lights. Charged me extra for the story he'd tell his kids. And when I flipped the switch, the glass glowed like a monument to victory. Deep vengeance red for special nights. Soft celebratory gold the rest of the time. The local news came back for the follow-up. Camera catching Vanessa out trimming bushes with shears that looked ready for war. Brooke asking her comment now that many called the glass a symbol of fighting petty disputes. And Vanessa stared at the towering illuminated wall, at the cheerful line of people snapping photos, at me waving from my curator spot. And after a long, strangled moment, she mumbled, "I prefer the wood," before shuffling inside defeated, the queen of the Willow Bend Homeowners Association, admitting on live television that she missed the plain 3-foot fence she had fought tooth and nail to destroy. Her own words sealing the surrender, while I held up a cheap ramen packet for the camera, saying the moral isn't really about fences, it's about taking ridiculous demands and running with them all the way to the bank. I used every penny from the view of vengeance to erase the entire loan, paid for the disco lights because victory should shine, bought a new ridiculously comfortable patio chair to replace the rusted tragedy, stocked a lifetime supply of artisanal coffee to sip while watching Vanessa, now hiding in her kitchen, refusing her sunroom. And slowly the exhibit scaled back. No more lines, but the sign stayed, and occasional tourist Venmos still ping in as passive income courtesy of her ego. I leaned back. In that chair these days, coffee warm in my hand, soft golden light bathing the glass, looking through the unbreakable clarity at her silhouette, pointedly ignoring my existence. And I feel the deep satisfaction of a man who refused to let entitlement steal his peace. This home on 456 Oak Grove Lane was my sanctuary, the place I poured sweat and dreams into, hoping for the family life I still believe is coming. And Vanessa tried to take that serenity by demanding I change what was rightfully mine. Yet in the end, her own words built the wall that protected it better than any would ever could, turning her complaint into my greatest victory and her daily reminder of what happens when you push too far. So I sit here, smile soft, the glass humming faintly with its lights, and I wonder, was my response justified, or did the spike go too far? Where exactly is the line in these neighborhood battles between standing up for your rights and becoming the villain in someone else's story? Is true justice served when the bully pays with her own discomfort, or does it reveal something darker about how we value peace, property, and human decency in the suburbs we all pretend are perfect? What do you think? Where would you have drawn the boundary?
Thanks so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, drop a comment telling me your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe, turn on the bell so you never miss the next one. See you in the next video.